The staff securing chairs, so I think we've got chairs. We can ask Donnelly and Stuckey to stand the whole meeting if we need to. Speaking of certain individuals, we do want to thank Devine, Donnelly, and Murray for lunch today. They are the ones that provided it, and it looks like they've all left the room except for John. Thank you very much. And we don't have any bills that we're going to work for them today. Our agenda calls for, to begin with, we will start with a hearing on House Bill 2168. And so I will open up the hearing on House Bill 2168 and recognize Reviser Lawrence to give us an overview of the legislation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon, committee. House Bill 2168 would reduce the fee to register with the state fire marshal for hemp processors to $500. Similarly, the bill would establish a maximum fee of $500 for any license issued by the Secretary of Agriculture pursuant to the Kansas Industrial Hemp Act. House Bill 2168 passed the House on a vote of 105 to 6 and would take effect on July 1 upon publication in the statute book, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
I apologize. I was looking for my folder, and it was right underneath the piece of paper in front of me. Did you say something about the state fire marshal?
I did. Currently, the Kansas Industrial Hemp Act requires hemp processors who are operating in the state to register with the state fire marshal and submit a registration fee. This bill would reduce that fee to $500.
And then there's also a fee for the Department of Agriculture?
Correct. The Department of Agriculture, I believe, is the entity that handles registration for hemp producers. So there's a hemp processor fee and a hemp producer fee.
And the current fees are, I'm sure they're in the bill, I just don't see them immediately. Are there, is there a limitation on the current fees?
I believe for the state fire marshal, it's currently not to exceed $1,000, and this bill would reduce that to $500. And I am not certain on the hemp producer fee if there's no cap on that in the bill currently. And thank you to Heather for assisting me in that.
We appreciate that. So we trust that the conferees will enlighten us. Senator Dahl.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So if I have corn, for example, what taxes do I have to pay on that when I have $500 fee and a tax, same thing? So if I have corn or wheat or any other crop, do I have to pay a tax on that like we have to on this proposed bill?
I don't believe so, sir.
I don't believe so either. So I don't understand why there's even a $500 on this. That's just my thought.
Senator Straub.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Tamara. This may be a question for research. How many current licenses do we have for hemp production?
For production, I would have to defer to the Department of Agriculture.
And how many processors?
I would have to defer to the state fire marshal.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
We trust, Senator, that we will receive that answer either from a conferee. If not, we'll certainly get it from our staff. Additional questions of our reviser? All right, seeing none, appreciate the information. Our first conferee is Representative Tori Marie Blue. Representative Blue, welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I think for once, I think you've been outshined in a sports coat today.
Well, your testimony's finished now. So, yes, I did notice that Senator Dahl thought that he could be a little more impressive than the chair, and I'm going to have to agree with you. I'm afraid he is. But anyway, let's get.
Oh, I'm sorry. We had members on the floor today in kilts, so it's been an interesting day at the Capitol. So, good morning, committee. My name is Tori Marie Blue, state representative from the 112th District, which is mostly Barton County. And back in 2021, we had a hemp tour that was open up to all elected officials, so it was great to have state members, but also, I guess, House members, Senate members, but also have the sitting Attorney General at the time came, because this is a big issue, because a lot of people get confused on hemp, and it is in the marijuana family, but the best example that we have received so far is, think about the pepper family. You have jalapeno peppers, Carolina Reaper peppers, and you have bell peppers. So some are really hot, some are not. So the thing is with industrial hemp, yes, it is in the THC marijuana family, but we're talking about a small, small fraction. And I want to thank Senator Dahl for his comments on corn, wheat, so forth. That's how this product should be, that's how this crop should be looked at, is that this is a crop, not necessarily something that if you are going to go take it and say you want to go have great fun activities with, you're not going to enjoy the outcome. So with that, I think that lowering this fee is a great start. We heard it last year in House Agriculture, and there was a lot more in the bill to begin with, so you'll see a lot of striking. This is a great compromise. I think the conversations are going to keep going with it, but I think this is a great start, and let's help out farmers and producers on this. And I'll stand for questions at the appropriate time.
Since you may have other obligations, we're going to go ahead and ask questions at this time. Senator Ware.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have a comment to make. He just assumed that I was going to because I was fiddling with the mic. The thing that strikes me the most about the whole thing of hemp, besides just it's just another crop, thank you very much, is in Kansas, we are so far behind so many other states, and we have ditchweed, if you will, that we can't kill. So why not monopolize on that and grow this industry, this infant industry, into something really big and powerful like so many other states have done? And honestly, I think we're still just scratching the surface.
Thank you, thank you, Senator. I know that there wasn't a question there, but I just want to state I completely agree with you. And this is a product that I think that we are behind in the state of Kansas, and we need to get the ball rolling.
You made a comment, Representative. You said something about a lot of striking. There's 0 striking in 21.
Oh, because I'm sorry, it was a House substitute.
Okay.
So the original House bill, we had some other things in there, and so that's what made it into a substitute bill.
The current fee for the state fire marshals maxed at $1,000, and I am not seeing at a quick glance in the legislation what is the other fee capped at, or is there no cap?
1,200. I had to phone a friend. 1,200.
That is the current fee or the current cap?
Current fee for the license. I'm getting a call. I think that we're about to vote on something. I hate to, but.
Got you. If you need to run, I
Okay.
understand. I've voted a time or two myself, so.
Thank you. If you have any questions, there's great testimony behind me.
Okay.
So thank you.
Representative. Okay, committee. I've never scared one off so quickly in the past, but anyway, so we shall move forward. We do have with us Sarah Stevens-Selman. She is the president of the Kansas Hemp Consortium and CEO Midwest Hemp Technology. Welcome to the committee.
Can you hear me? Yeah. As the chairman said, my name is Sarah Stevens, and I'm here today as the president of the Kansas Hemp Consortium and CEO of Midwest Hemp Technology, both Kansas-based companies focused on production and processing of agricultural hemp. That is, as we define, hemp grown for fiber and grain. I join you today in support of the proposed update to 2168 and believe it is absolutely essential to scaling agricultural hemp processing and production in Kansas. For 6 seasons, or since the crops was reintroduced in Kansas, I have been conducting and overseeing research on industrial hemp, including 2 seasons as a grant-funded researcher for Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education. That's a USDA-funded research program administered through the University of Minnesota. Also, as a 6th-year producer, I know there is a lot to learn about this crop and a lot of confusion when it comes to the differences among hemp varieties and their end uses. Please note this distinction and ensure that you know about the unique properties of agricultural hemp. The hemp that we grow and process is for grain and fiber. We do not harvest any floral material where all cannabinoids like CBD and THC originate. Agricultural hemp grows on traditional row crop farms on large acreages, and it's well suited to the Kansas environment. It's dioecious, which means there are male and female plants that pollinate and put their energy into high protein grain. It literally could not be more different than CBD production. CBD dominant hemp is really a horticulture crop. It's grown in a greenhouse or another managed environment. It has supplemental lighting, a germination chamber, and they grow only female plants. This requires man-made environments that alter the plant's chemistry to produce high cannabinoid outcomes. It literally could not be more different than the acreage sections that we grow. I would invite you to tour our processing facility in Augusta, Kansas at your convenience. We founded the company in 2021, and we buy directly from Kansas farmers who grow hemp fiber and grain varieties. We take 1,000-pound bales of hemp that look very much like a hay bale, and we break them down into hurd, fiber, and micronized hemp. We clean and separate hemp grains that we buy directly from Kansas farmers and turn them into high-protein food and omega-rich oil for human consumption. We make Hempy's Heart protein powder and seed oil. It's available for sale at local health food stores and perfectly safe for you to put on your kid's smoothie in the morning. In fact, today you can go to any Dillon's, Kroger, Hy-Vee, Whole Foods, any health food store and buy Hemp Hearts, hemp protein powder, and hemp seed oil. It almost all comes from Canada today, though, however. In fact, we imported $55 million worth of hemp grain food for human consumption last year. The federal approval process for feeding hemp to animals is also unfolding, and AFCO, which is the feed certifying officials, has approved hemp seed meal for laying hens only, and that's going to be published in their register this summer, August. The benefits of industrial hemp are long and varied, and in order for Kansas to realize the environmental and economic advantages of industrial hemp, we need to remove barriers for farmers. Today, the licensing fee to grow hemp is more than $1,500. As the KDA said, it's $1,200 once you receive approval, but it's $147 to apply. And then you also have $225 sampling fee that occurs at the end of the season, and that can be more than one sampling if you have more than one variety or more than one succession or even more than one field that's more than a quarter mile away. So it ends up at least $1,500 by the time you put all of those fees together. So instead of adding to the stigma that stifled the production of hemp for nearly 80 years, the KDA and your committee here can lower the fees and encourage the development of this industry. The proposed language, as we discussed, makes the maximum fee for producers at $500, and this may seem like just incremental progress. We would like to have it be zero, but it is progress all the same. And we do think it's an important nod to Kansas producers that the industry is moving in the right direction. There are 4, I think one of you had a question about the number of licensees that are out right now. There's 4 agricultural hemp processors, and last year I think about 42 growers. Now we did have 220 growers the first 2 years of the program, 19 and 20, but that number has dwindled over time, and most of the farmers I talked to do relate it to excessive fees. Back on the 4 processing facilities, I would estimate that's representing $4 to $5 million worth of infrastructure investment by Kansas companies. Myself at Midwest Hemp Technology, we have spent the last 3 years funding, equipping, and staffing the company. We've made a lot of investments of time, money, sweat, and some tears in the facility. We purchase agricultural hemp from Kansas farmers, but we also have to source from Missouri and Oklahoma right now because there's not enough hemp being produced. We had about, maybe the KDA can confirm, but I think it was 700 acres of harvested hemp in the whole state last year. And between our 4 processing facilities alone, we could easily, among those facilities, probably handle about 10,000 acres in the state. So we don't have enough acres to support the 4 processing facilities. I appreciate your time and your consideration. I thank you for finding solutions that encourage agricultural hemp production to flourish. be available for questions. And again, I'd like to invite you to Midwest Hemp Technology in Augusta next time you're down in that part of the state. Thank you very much for holding this hearing today.
Committee questions of Ms. Stevens? Senator Waxman.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chairman, and thank you so much for your testimony. I'm not sure how to pronounce your last name, so I'm going to let that go.
Stevens.
Stevens? Okay. Well, I was thinking about the next one. Okay, you mentioned there's 700 acres in Kansas that are farmers, that's how much and they're down to 42, that used to have over 200?
Growers, licensed growers, yeah.
Okay, growers.
Now, a lot of those growers in the beginning were really CBD focused. We've really had an increase in the number of grain and fiber acres and producers over time, but a lot of the people that entered in 19 and 20 were focused on CBD, so a lot of those growers have left the industry, but the fiber and grain interest is on its way up.
I guess my question would be, if this bill passed, you think this is going to make much difference to have more farmers? I mean, this is a question. Thank you.
Sure. I think it would take a little while for it to play out in numbers and that we would see. I do hear from farmers that say, I just don't want to get involved when the fees are this high, and I have a lot more certainty I can get for insurance on my other crops. It's easier to do. I know what I'm doing there. I don't want to take the risk. A lot of states, not a lot, 8 or 9 states right now have moved their hemp department. They've basically abolished their state-level hemp department and gone to regulating the crop with the USDA. Missouri, for example, and I have a list of the other states. So in those states, the fee is $30, $35, and it lasts for 3 years. So maybe the more long-term solution is to look in that direction. But we've been advocating for lowering the fees for a couple years, and really appreciate the chance to get here. We do think it's progress. It might not be the ultimate long-term solution, but I think it would help. Even just the headlines that came out when the House passed the bill that the fee was cut in half. I heard from multiple people just reading that, and of course some of them thought it had already happened and was done, and sign me up. And I said, probably would take effect for next year, but. Yeah, I do think it would. Eventually, we will see more involvement, whether that's with just a lower fee at the state level program or moving to USDA and really abolishing the fee, maybe happen in the future.
Senator Straub.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, President Selman. Currently, I don't know what the other states do, but is there is there a hemp checkoff program in any of these other states? Like we have, a half a cent per bushel for corn,
Yeah.
2 cents per bushel for wheat. Have they considered something like that in order to operate the licensing program?
I do not know about other states. We don't have a hemp checkoff in Kansas right now. It probably is a good thing for us to start looking into as an industry and work with the KDA on that. But it's not in effect right now, and I'm not sure about other states. Kelly Ripple's coming up. He might have more information in that.
Senator Dahl.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I went to a hemp farm, and there was a bunch of the stalks and such, and they had them all over in one pile. And my understanding, those stalks are full of protein and such, could be used for roughage for cattle and such. But they said that has to be burned and thrown away.
Well,
This was several years ago.
yeah, and if those were CBD plants to begin with, they really didn't, a lot of CBD growers didn't have anything to do with the biomass. They got the floral material off, and then the biomass was just kind of, they did burn it sometimes. Our whole approach is different. We're growing grain-forward varieties, and we are harvesting the grain with a combine, and then we're baling the stalks, and then we do break those stalks down with a hay grinder and air processing conveyors. And we turn those into hurd, which a lot of people use for animal bedding and also for mulch and also for hempcrete, which has recently been approved as an insulation in residential building. We definitely don't burn any part of the crop, but I do think in the early days of CBD, people were doing that.
My understanding, this was the father of our country, George Washington. This was his major go-to crop, if I'm not mistaken.
It's neat to think about, isn't it?
Senator McGinn.
Just a question. When you first get in, wasn't there a real high license fee or application when you first are getting in?
I've paid these fees every year for 6 years and gotten fingerprints every year. So it's not more the first time, but it's an annual fee of about $1,500.
I had 10,000 in my head, or something outrageous, but
No.
that might have been for a different type of producer. So it's always been the amount that you're currently paying, right?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, that's true.
No buy-in. Okay, thank you.
Senator Ware.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So you've been talking about mulch and bedding and that sort of thing. How developed so far in Kansas are you seeing the use of the fiber for fabrics, for rope, rope was what the original
Right.
product was, right?
Yes.
How developed are we on that front?
So Representative Blue, she's here on behalf of Great Bend, and there's another fiber processor there called South Bend Industrial Hemp, and they're really focused on producing long strand fiber, and they have a decortication system. So kind of different with CBD. Ours is focused on grain, theirs is focused on fiber. So they have taller plants, they cut them down differently, they don't combine the seed off, they actually harvest before it goes to seed. And then they do produce long strand fiber with their machines. I think that they are finding some markets for that, I don't know. But I mean, that's what they're producing, and I think that's working out pretty well for them. We don't have a lot of American-made textiles anyway with cotton. So I think that market, in our opinion at Midwest Hemp, why we focused on the grain, that the fiber market was maybe a little bit further off. So we go through and combine the grain, and we take what's left of the stalk, and then we chop it up in a hay grinder. And so we're not making long strand fiber. A better market for us is to actually grind the fiber down into about 150 micron particles and use it as a bioplastic filler as a black carbon replacement.
Thank you for your testimony. Appreciate you being
I
here.
really appreciate the time.
Committee, our next conferee is Kelly, I'm going to pronounce it Ripple, President of Planted Association of Kansas. And if I mispronounced your name, I apologize. You can get me straightened out.
No, you definitely pronounced it correctly. Chairman Peck, thank you so much for having me today. Committee members, thank you for holding this meeting. I'm not going to provide too much more information than what Sarah has already provided, but I did give some information to the House Committee, and I've also sent you all electronic versions of what I'm going to talk about. So hopefully you may have those. But I just wanted to kind of start off by saying that the trend is being observed and experienced in other states as well that does deal with the transition to fiber and grain. And so we saw a huge spike of licenses, 2019, 2020. Now we're back down. But that's still a positive trend. And over time, we will expect to see more adoption. And that's because there is primarily a growing of increase in demand. And kind of what, I guess, going back to the question about how the supply chain in Kansas looks, quite frankly, there are businesses that have reached out to us that are wanting producers, that are wanting to have contracts with farmers. Green Dot Bioplastics is an example. They're down by Emporia. They make bioplastics out of sustainably grown products, whether that be flax, linseed, hemp, and a number of others. And they told me that they don't source hemp from the United States. They import all of it because there is not enough acreage here yet. So quite frankly, I mean, where we're at right now is we just need more adoption from farmers. And that will help connect the supply chain. Depending on what kind of models you're looking at, we could be looking at a $16, $20 billion industry by the end of 2030. And that deals primarily with fiber and grain, But as we've kind of talked about, like Sarah's mentioned, these sectors span at least 9 to 10 different industries. So really a farmer could harvest a crop for their grain, harvest the rest for their fiber, and that could go to multiple sources. And so that's a huge value add to farmers. Currently, it is prohibitive to have a fee that it's set at. We've done some, I've done some fact gathering from other states and at the national level. And as Sarah mentioned, other states are moving their programs to USDA to really make it more streamlined for farmers, so they don't have necessarily a fee to pay, but also they're eliminating a duplication of reporting. So right now, if a farmer is wanting to grow soybean or wheat, corn, they report their acreage to the Farm Service Agency, the FSA, and that's the way that reporting works. But for hemp, there is still another step with the State Department of Agriculture who then sends that on to the Department of Ag. So there are some eliminations, I think, of duplication that we should be looking at in the future to maybe make this more efficient. And also, we do need a checkpoint program. That has been talked about at a national level, but there also needs to be some changes, I think, at the federal level in the Farm Bill in order for that to happen, because hemp is still not traded at the same commodity level as other crops are. And so with the adoption, with more research going into the crop protection and crop insurance programs, these things will develop, and we are anticipating a checkoff program here, hopefully within the next few years, and I think the next Farm Bill will help dictate some of that. I do think that it's important also to look at the way other states, as far as the license fees goes, the way other states have set their fees. Currently, there are only 2 states in America that have license fees as high as Kansas. And I also provided this to you in electronic format, so hopefully you have this and can look at it as well. But I've color-coded the different states in just to show that we are one of the strictest states, and we started out that way. I've verified with the USDA hemp director that we've maintained that over time. Other states have kind of loosened their rules and regulations and laws. We still have a little ways to go in that regard. So I think that, as Sarah said, lowering the fee is going to absolutely send a message that the department, that the state does support farmers and that they support the crop of growing agricultural hemp. There are multiple, I think, differences that can be discussed as far as the cannabinoid content of different cultivars and varieties. But primarily, we are seeing a change in fiber and grain, and for traditional row crop farmers in the state, that's what we're finding works best with their operations, because they already have the equipment, the wherewithal, the know-how to use a seed driller and a combine and these types of equipment and expertise that's needed for agricultural hemp. So I didn't really introduce myself. I apologize. I am serving in my 3rd term as a member, an appointed member of the Industrial Hemp Advisory Board with the department, and so I'm more than happy to provide any information that I can to help this process along. And I also just want to mention that I came earlier this morning from the Shawnee County Farm and Food Advisory Council, and so there's some really exciting things that are going on both at the county level and state level that hemp is going to bolster. It's going to help in multiple ways, whether we're talking about soil health and regeneration, all the way to providing a sustainable source for feed for animals as well as humans. So again, I'm open to any questions that you may have, and I know that was a lot, but again, thank you so much for holding this hearing, and we hope to see a good change from this.
Questions of Mr. Ripple? Senator Fagg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Ripple, thank you for your presentation. I went on the tour of the facility out in Great Bend. I know, was it last summer or 2 summers ago? One thing that caught my ear was that there's houses being built in South America with this kind of material.
With their product, yeah.
So, you know, what's going to happen in this industry is a lot to that. The other thing I remember was that you had to keep the males and the females so far apart. And that example out there, I think they were 4 miles apart, if I remember right. So there's probably a little more keeping an eye on things at the right time of the year. I don't know. I don't know when they come out and inspect you or how that works. You might talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, that is correct. Hemp is a wind-pollinated plant, and so if pollen exists, which it does in every corner of the state because there's wild hemp in every county practically. And so depending on what kind of cultivar, what variety you're growing, and for what end use, you may want to keep those separate, obviously, because it may cross-pollinate and it may degrade your well, if you're growing for cannabinoid content outdoors, which is not very likely, it may do that. Or it may alter the plant in some way where it won't produce the same amount of seed or a different type of seed. So yeah, there's some complexity as far as why you would want your crop to be protected in some way, whether that means barriers or have crop insurance or, you know, a number of things, definitely. And I also wanted to just mention, you all may know this already, but crop insurance is available for farmers who want to grow hemp, but you must grow for at least 2 years. And so you have that acreage history. And hopefully, and I don't believe that it's available for prevent plant claims right now, but hopefully in time with, like I said, with more adoption and more involvement from farmers, that crop insurance program will change.
Senator Straub.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Ripple, for the information. And the South Bend Industrial Hemp business is in my district. In fact, I served on the County Extension Council with Aaron Baldwin, one of the owners of that many years ago. And anyway, the way I see it is hemp, I don't know that it's the fee that's necessarily keeping farmers out of the industry, although I'm supportive of lowering that fee. I don't think we should be prohibiting people from operating business. But what are the challenges that you hear from people in growing hemp? Because what I hear from a lot of traditional farmers is that it's really hard on equipment. It's also an industry that they don't know, so they kind of resort back to growing the crops that they know well, and like you said, that they can be insured on. So what other barriers do you hear from other farmers?
Yeah, so the barriers of growing, of cultivating, harvesting are exactly what you mentioned, in addition to growing anything in 2019, 2020 was really difficult. So we had just a deluge of precipitation. So that was, and hemp doesn't necessarily like to have wet feet. So depending on your soil type, and that can also, you know, that's an opportunity. Maybe a farmer can test their soil so they know what variety would best suit their conditions. All the way to, yes, absolutely, your equipment for harvesting and for planting, that can take some trial and error. And what we've seen with leaders like South Bend Hemp, they got into it so early, they did the trial and error. They know what works, and so do their partnering farmers. And so it does take some, I mean, hemp it's an ancient plant, but it has a lot to teach us. And like Sarah said, this has been prohibited for over 80 years. So no one really alive has really dealt with it in a very extensive way. And so it does require some trial and error, some investment. And quite frankly, going back to a license being 1 year, for an investor, that can increase risk. And so one of the other things that states have done is increase the length or the time span for a license to say, okay, let's maybe, if you have a license fee, maybe that can last you for 3 years and then you won't have to re-up. Investors are going to be more amicable to that. And so making sure that you have the right equipment with the right investors, the right partners, the right contracts with your processor. That's another requirement for crop insurance for hemp. You have to have in place a contract with a processor. And so if there isn't one in your area, or if you need to figure that out, yeah, those are the gaps that we need to help others with, and that's what we've been trying to do. I think also just the getting over the notion that it's foreign, it's new, but it isn't necessarily dangerous. You know, like a lot of farmers, we're Midwest nicety, you know, we don't want to rock the boat. And a lot of farmers, they may want to, they see maybe their neighbors working with hemp, or they see value add in a different community. They may not necessarily want to talk to their local or county officials about increasing the support of hemp and all that, because they don't really want to rock the boat. But on the advocacy side, we are hearing all the time from farmers, hey, we want to grow this, we want to be able to contribute. So yeah, there are multiple barriers, both on a logistical and practical as well as perception basis.
Senator Dahl.
Thank you. This is more of a comment than a question. What I was hearing from a number of hemp farmers is pesticides, because they don't know what works, what don't work. They don't even know what bugs are attracted to hemp. But the herbicide aspect, what will hurt it, what won't hurt it. So I just want to throw that in there.
You're absolutely right. Yes, very good point by Senator Dahl. I think that's part of the education. You know, there is an approved list of chemicals that can be used with hemp, and so making sure that farmers are aware of that, know the protocol with it, and also, yeah, pests are a common problem, as with all crops, as well as things like aflatoxin and other things with crops. We have to be mindful of how best to treat the pathologies and the way that mutations can grow within the crop, and that's all part of the process, for sure. Yeah.
We appreciate your testimony, Mr. Ripple.
Yes, thank you.
Committee, I will direct your attention to written testimony from Brian Oshner, is the way I'm going to pronounce the name. We do have neutral testimony from the Kansas Department of Agriculture. Deputy Secretary Olson, welcome to the committee.
Chairman Peck, members of the committee, it's a pleasure to be here with you today. I am here to provide neutral testimony in regards to 2168. The Kansas Department of Plant Protection and Weed Control, it provides the regulatory oversight for the industrial hemp grown in Kansas. It first began in 2019 as a research for research purposes, and then switched to 2021 to commercial growth. So anyone who is seeking to cultivate or grow industrial hemp must be licensed as a commercial hemp producer within the state. I know we've talked a little bit about the applications, licenses, and I just want to spell that out for you. So the application period each year is January 1st to March 15th. During that time, someone who is interested in being approved to be a grower for industrial hemp must submit an application to the agency. That application fee is $100. In conjunction with that, it is a requirement that there is fingerprinting and background checks that go along with that application, and that cost is a $47 cost. Then if that applicant is approved, then the licensing fee to be a commercial hemp producer is $1,200. So just as we go through, that's how the process and they add up. So as it is indicated, House Bill 2168 would limit any fee to that $500 cap. In 2023, in the summer of 2023, the Kansas Department of Agriculture hosted a roundtable with legislators, with stakeholders, with plant protection staff, as well as licensees, to discuss areas in which the agency might be able to make changes to further support the industrial hemp program. Several different ideas were brought forward, and one of those was looking at the licensing fee lowering that licensing fee. And so what I want to talk through is just at that time, and it is our position today, like that we have concerns about lowering the fee, but would certainly react accordingly to the will of the legislature if that fee was lowered. So like many of the agency's programs, the Commercial Industrial Hemp Program is a fee-funded program and does not currently utilize any of the state general fee fund costs to support that. Initially, during the research period, our licensee numbers were quite high, and revenues exceeded the expenditures of the agency for the first 2 years. However, since 2019, we have seen a drop, since 2020, really, we've seen a drop in numbers of growers during that time. Based on that, our carryover from our previous years has been able to sustain the program despite the reduction in the number of growers. So our annual costs, just to talk a little bit about that, we do have inspection costs, there's sampling and laboratory tests. Those are paid by the producer, which is where another charge that was mentioned, and as well as our staff salaries and our administrative costs. We've worked pretty hard to try to keep those costs consistent and low. If you look on the next page of our testimony, you can see a chart that shows both the expenditures, which are in blue, and then the number of licensees and the revenue generated from the licensees. So you can see since 2021, we have maintained kind of somewhat of a steady, if not lowering, annual expenditures, but we've continually seen a drop in those licensees each year. So at the beginning of fiscal year 2024, there was approximately a $227,000 carryover for the industrial hemp program. And our annual expenses are approximately $159,000. We have made a reduction in staffing to the program because we have a lower number of activity required due to the lower number of producers. So we will not see that happen during fiscal year 24. So we will not see that full cost savings until fiscal year 2025. However, we do expect that our annual expenditures will be roughly $129,000, $130,000 assuming our producers are steady. It is based on those numbers that we ultimately decided that we would, if we would have proactively lowered the costs, we did not think it was fiscally sound decision for the agency to do, knowing that we would have seen a need to ask for state general funds earlier than if the fees are lowered. The next chart shows that exact shift. So you can see the blue line extends to fiscal year 28, which is where we would arise if we have no change in the fee and no change in our licensee numbers. The orange line is the lowering of the fee with the steady expenditures that we expect. And we've also factored into that an increase of approximately 20% of producers because, as it's been noted, we do believe that there are some producers who have an interest in becoming licensed if the fees were lowered. So based on that, it is still projected that the fiscal carryover would run out during fiscal year 2027. Which would be 1 year sooner than what we would do if there was no change made. So if under existing fees and existing expenditures, we would anticipate, we would like to see, if we saw 80 licensees, that would be basically net neutral as far as expenditures and then the revenue coming in from those licensees at the existing level. If we continue to see an increase in licensees that might exceed that 80 number, we would be considering looking at increasing that fiscal or the FTE count to account for the additional manpower and labor that the program may require. So if it is the will of the legislature, we will gladly implement the reduction of the fees. But I did just want to share that this is something that we have looked into, and as an agency, we did not think it was in the best interest of overall to reduce those fees without the direction of the legislature. I will be glad to stand for questions at any time.
Deputy Secretary, I appreciate your testimony. So you mentioned there's an application or licensing period from January 1 to March 15. So if a person applies in April, they have to wait till the following January?
That is correct.
And you also listed the application fee, the license fee, background checks, several fees. Your understanding of the legislation is it would reduce the cumulative of all of those fees to 500? I don't read it that way.
My interpretation is that any fee may not exceed $500, and I would defer to the reviser on that interpretation.
So your interpretation is that the background fee could be up to $500, and each one of these fees could be up to $500?
That's how I would interpret it. The agency would not change, we would not envision changing the application fee, nor would we change the background fee. That is a cost we simply pass on from the KBI of $47 onto the licensee or the applicant.
Okay, thank you. Senator Dahl?
So do we still have the overbearing regulations on whether you step on that field or not? Do you have to have a background check because it's very labor intense, but the background checks are incredible. And you can get workers, and the background checks are also expensive. So are those still in place like they were 2 years ago?
I would have to verify that, and perhaps one of our other conferees could speak to that. But I do know that there, at one point in time, it was required for all employees to have a background check on record.
But not even employees, if somebody wanted to just walk out there to hang out, just to see what it looks like, and they got caught, seen, and if they didn't have the background check, like, let's say your dad came out and looked at the field, he didn't have a background check, he could be busted.
I don't know of any situations like that. I do know they have to post. Yeah, I do know that they do have to post that it is industrial hemp field and is licensed by the Kansas Department of Agriculture. But beyond that, I would have to provide additional information. I don't have that.
Senator Fagg?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your presentation. A couple questions. One, do you have any history of charging fines? You've went out and inspected these places where you found a problem? Anybody been charged any kind of fines for anything?
So in regards to the enforcement, we don't charge fines, but part of the process in order to harvest hemp, it has to be tested within 30 days of harvest to ensure that that THC level is under the threshold that's limited. What has happened in the past, if that, there's a couple different avenues. If the lot tests beyond that threshold for THC, the producer can request that we come and test again, because there can be variations throughout the field. So a producer can choose to retest, but then if it continues to be above the threshold that is allowed, and there's not a fine necessarily, but they are required to destroy the crop when we have to have proof that the crop is destroyed as part of that process.
Okay, and another one I'm kind of hung up on is fingerprinting annually. You know, if a guy makes an app, same person, you fingerprint him, why do you have to fingerprint annually?
So I can give you a little bit of background on that, but I would defer to our law enforcement agencies. But as we were designing and building the research industrial hemp program, as well as then as we transitioned to commercial, I believe that was one of the requests that was addressed as a way of trying to prevent other nefarious activities from occurring.
If you look at your rules and regs, does the federal government come into that at all, or have we developed our own rules and regs in the state of Kansas? Just wondering how the two kind of compared.
Certainly. So when the research program was originally established, we very much had to submit a state plan, similar to what I've talked to you about, a pesticide state plan. We had to submit a state plan that met the requirements that were outlined by the USDA. As we transitioned to the commercial program, there were some final rulings from the Ag Marketing Service as to what was allowed and not allowed, but our program largely stayed within those, and there was not very many changes that we made from the research to the commercial program.
Thank you.
Senator Straub.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kelsey, I'm not sure if you can, sorry, Deputy Secretary Olson, sorry. My question is about using hemp as an animal food product. Is that a regulation by the state of Kansas, or is that a federal regulation? Because I believe we can import animal food products that are that contain hemp. In fact, I've got my own lip gloss that has a tiny bit of hemp seed oil in it. So why is there a regulation on not being able to feed that to animals?
So hemp is not an approved feed source for production animals that go into the food chain. That is given through, so the state of Kansas adopts the animal feed control officer's approved list of ingredients, as well as generally recognized as safe products. So it is a combination between federal level items that we adopt at the state level, but that is not a currently approved feed source for our animals that we're, for any animals other than they're working on the poultry option as we speak.
I don't know, I'm just confused by this because as a kid we had hogs and they will eat absolutely everything. They love banana peels. So why, I'm not sure, is that a federal regulation then?
I'd have to follow up specifically on that. So the Department of Agriculture does administer the dairy and feed regulatory program, but I would have to get back to you specifically if that is, I believe it's what we adopt from the federal level at the state through rules and regs, but I would have to follow up with you on that specifically.
Okay. And if I may, one more question. I know South Bend Industrial Hemp processes the fiber for like animal bedding. So it's okay for them to sleep on it, and they're probably going to chew on it too. So that's why I have this question of where's this coming from, and what's the logic behind it? Thank you.
Senator Ware.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm wondering about feed for companion animals. Where are we on that in the state of Kansas right now?
That again goes through the feed regulations, and that has not been adopted, nor is it approved at the federal level.
Okay, I'm wondering if anybody else in the room, any of our other experts, could help us out with any of those questions?
Not at this time. We've got Deputy Secretary Olson at the mic. You're welcome to ask anyone afterwards. We're getting up against the clock.
Okay.
I'm happy to provide that information to you as a follow-up.
Not now. Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Deputy Secretary, for being here. So we heard in some of the earlier proponent testimony the possibility that USDA could manage this program as opposed to KDA. Have you had a chance to look at that, or do you have any comments?
So we have not thoroughly explored that. However, I can share a little bit of details about that. There have been 6 states who adopted a state program that have transitioned to the federal program. And so for states that are operating under a hemp producer license, there is not an application or a licensing deadline. It is a $30 license, and they are valid for 3 years upon application or after it's been issued. The sampling agents and the third-party labs are used for testing as for part of the compliance sampling, which is something that is still required. And then additionally, the federal program, the producers are also required to report to the Farm Service Agency. And I would note that at this time, we only have there's about 20% of our producers who currently grow and are not reporting those numbers to the Farm Service Agency. But that's what I can share at this point in time.
Thank you, Deputy Secretary, for being here today and providing some information for the committee's benefit. Committee, we do have another oral neutral testimony. Nicholas Reinecker? If I didn't pronounce your name right, I apologize.
You did just fine, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for allowing me to speak today. My name is Nicholas Reinecker from Inman, Kansas. I'm I'm neutral to this bill because I don't want to step on the toes of anybody in an organization, nor your toes necessarily, but I'm testifying as a citizen in my own capacity. And I too would like to be involved in the cannabis program, however we want to define it. I've spent 10 years coming up here and advocating for cannabis liberty, starting in 2017 with Senate Bill 263. And one of the things that I think that regardless of low THC cannabis or high THC cannabis, there should be no fingerprinting, no background checks, no special fees, and certainly no armed executive agents of the state fire marshal's office burdening farmers in their livelihood. The farmer's market is the last bastion of free enterprise, and when I plant my tomatoes and my cucumbers and everything like that, I don't have to worry about the government involving themselves in that. But for some reason, they want to be in this. Now, I've been told that hemp and what we define as marijuana are two different plants. And if that's true, then why is there need for all this extra government and layers of fingerprinting and all this stuff? And even in the bill itself, it's picking winners and losers under the guise of a federal supremacy model. Now, the current situation that we have is with the hemp being imported in, we have all these gas stations and cannabis dispensaries that are selling unregulated products that are marketed to children with high CBD content and who knows what else, all imported, but we are stifling this industry and the farmers because of the fear of THC, or like I said, taking the federal supremacy out of context and saying that we can't, as a sovereign state, allow the individuals of citizens of Kansas to have liberty and freedom with a plant that does bear food, seed, quality seed, and therapeutic value, and all kinds of other things. So you have to deal with the issue of the federal and state dual sovereignty issue, and from my perspective, to allow a lot of these things and issues to clear up. You want to be like Missouri, take cannabis and eliminate any criminal penalties regarding the possession and cultivation thereof, and we can start there from a nice, clean slate. I don't care about the insurance. I'm just looking for individual liberty, and the way that this is worded, we are actually hurting those people that would be the best gardeners by saying that if somebody has had a felony violation of 5721, we are going to say that they cannot be involved in this. So you guys, a lot of you in here know that I've been coming up here for the last 10 years advocating for cannabis liberty. And like I said, I don't want to step on toes of the organizations that are kind of being like Oliver asking for more, but just some things to think about. And I put some pictures there of the place that would be great, but I just don't feel like I want to be involved in that sort of burden to get into the low THC cannabis industry in Kansas. So I will thank you for allowing me to speak today and stand for any questions.
Mr. Reinecker, we appreciate it. We do have committee also written neutral from Robin Bonsall, and so I will direct your attention to that. We have no other conferees for, against, or neutral, so we will close the hearing on House Bill 2168. I had hoped to pick up on working House Bill 2477. We have gone our full hour, so I will not continue the committee hearing, although most of us may not have anything going on for a little bit of period of time. But we will definitely next week spend the bulk of our time working on legislation to determine the will of the committee on particular bills. And so I would ask you to be here. There is a potential of meeting on Monday. I have not decided at this time. I may poll the committee and find out, but watch your email box and also watch the printed calendar to know if we do have a committee meeting on Monday. With that, we are adjourned.